message to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in terms of our efforts to deal with this climate change. I know that Australian government, the new government, has signed the Kyoto Protocol on global warming and has proposed a legislation for carbon reduction or carbon emission trading scheme in the Australian Parliament. And the Republic of Korea, the Lee Myung-bak government, is very seriously committed to the carbon reduction and the green growth in Korea, so that Korea can play a very important and very active role in between advanced countries and developing countries in preparation for the Copenhagen conference in December. I would like to ask for a view briefly on this climate change, the challenges, and the messages to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Prime Minister Howard.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's of course common knowledge that the government I led did not sign or did not ratify the Kyoto Protocol. And I don't disguise that fact, and we had reasons. We were of the view that the ratification of it would not, at that time, have been in our longer-term national interest, particularly given the structure and the heavy reliance of so much of the Australian economy on our resources. I did, however, before we left government, commit my government to the development of an emissions trading system, which in a roughly analogous way has been picked up by the new government, although there are some differences. The essence of my view is that this problem has to be solved internationally. You cannot expect any country to commit its economy to the huge restructuring that people tell us will be involved without a knowledge that other countries are going to join in the process. I can understand the view of developing countries that so much of the build-up of emissions in the past has emanated from other countries, from the industrialised north, from Europe, from the United States. I can understand that, but I also ask those countries to understand that that equation is altering very rapidly, particularly with the heavy industrialisation of countries such as China and India. Therefore, we do need a worldwide agreement. My own personal view is that this problem will overwhelmingly be dealt with in the future and resolved in the future by the application of technology. I think the way forward for all countries is the rapid embrace of technological solutions, of processes such as carbon extraction, of the degasification of coal and all the other processes that rely very heavily on technology. The world has solved so many problems with technology in the past. I find it very hard to believe that this won't overwhelmingly be solved. I guess the other, and it's probably a minority view to express at any international conference, but I have no reluctance in expressing it. I do hope that some of the intellectual bullying that has gone on in relation to this issue is tempered in the future. The proposition that the science is totally in and there can be no further correspondence entered into, and we won't even listen to any contrary arguments or any ameliorating arguments, strikes me as intellectually offensive and against all the traditions of scientific inquiry and thought. And I hope the world has a slightly more temperate view on that and accepts that there are people who don't totally embrace the new religion of climate change, that they do have some reservations. I think we need, as a world community, to work together. I think we need to try and develop in our own nations market-based responses. An emissions trading system of the type that my government proposed is certainly a market-based response. But I think in the process we should allow for a continuation of the intellectual debate, and some of the intellectual bullying that I've seen on this subject I think has been quite appalling.
Prime Minister Lee.
Again, the climate issue is perhaps at the moment the most important issue facing the global community. And here, again, talking about East Asia, the position of China becomes extremely crucial, not only because it is perhaps the most important country in terms of carbon emission, but unless China takes a very consistent policy and positive policy to a common effort to resolving this problem, it will be very difficult to acquire international agreement. Same is true with the nuclear armament issue. So we hope that the climate issue will be resolved successfully. As Prime Minister Howard said, we cannot force individual states to a specific standard. It has to be a voluntary agreement. And the United Nations should take a great deal of leadership, and we are, of course, very proud of the fact that our former foreign minister is our Secretary General there, and he had played a very decisive role in securing the Bali roadmap last year, and I hope he could be equally successful in bringing some sort of a compromise at Copenhagen this year. And in fact, Korea is trying our best, sometimes even going beyond our own capacity, to play a very constructive role in bringing some sort of compromise in the climate issue, just like our role in G20. We are kind of situated in the middle in terms of development, in terms of size, and even in terms of influence. But I think all these efforts, going over the economic crisis, financial crisis, and the climate crisis, will immensely help moving together toward a better global neighborhood.
Could I just add one thing I forgot, Mr. Chairman, and that is that an integral part, in my view, of the response to climate change must, of course, be the widespread embrace of nuclear power, which I think that is a given. And I know there are different views in different countries, including in my own. There's quite a sharp division of opinion on this, but I have for a long time believed that it is a very key part of the solution, and I hope those countries that now have reservations about it will change their attitudes.
Okay. I know time is almost up, but if it is possible, if you don't mind, and I would like to have maybe a couple of questions from the floor to each of the prime ministers with a very short question. And perhaps after that we can wind up the session. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, identify yourself, make your question very short, and please let us know to whom your question is directed. Yes, Professor Soya from Japan. Please get to the microphone on the aisle.
Thank you. Is it on? No. Is it?
Can someone fix the microphone, the wireless one?
This is on? Oh. Thank you very much, Chairman Park. Well, it was really refreshing to hear the term middle power from Prime Minister John Howard. Oh, sorry, my name is Yoshihide Soya. I'm teaching at Keio University in Japan, and also serving as director of the Institute of East Asian Studies of the same university. The term middle power being heard from Prime Minister Howard was very much refreshing. And in the course of your presentation, you sort of juxtaposed a group of middle powers, being Korea and Australia, and perhaps a group of great powers, US, China, and Japan. And I've been notorious for advancing the thesis of Japan's middle power diplomacy. And so in my categorization, Japan, in terms of substance of its policies, is clearly on the side of the middle powers. And from that perspective, I'd like to ask specific questions to each of the prime ministers. Prime Minister Howard, you signed the Joint Security Declaration with Prime Minister Abe in March 2007. And to me, that's a typical epitome of a middle power security cooperation. We are talking of human security, regional capacity building, disaster relief, and so forth. And Japan's role in those domains have long been even less than the middle power. We haven't been able to discharge enough responsibilities. And my question is, theoretically, I think the same could be applied to Japan and South Korea. The kind of similar security cooperation statement in the domain of non-traditional securities. I think there are foundations for those kinds of security cooperation between Japan and South Korea. And of course, I'm fully aware that obstacles are enormous. So in reality, that may not happen. But if I may allow it to be presented as a possible future vision, I'd like to know how both of the prime ministers would think, if that's feasible, if we succeed in overcoming obvious obstacles with a long-term viewpoints. And out of that, maybe Japan, Australia, South Korea cooperation would open up as a future possibility. Again, that's a typical middle power security cooperation among countries residing between US and China, two strategically independent players. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Prime Minister, can you make a brief response to the...
Yes, I've used the expression middle power not as a deliberate attempt to distinguish and separate Australia from the United States, one of the two big powers to which you refer. I mean, it is well known that there is no relationship that's more important in Australia than our relationship with the United States. And when I was Prime Minister, I emphasised it quite heavily, although I was careful at the same time to build a pragmatic relationship with China. I think I use it in the sense that there are certain contributions that countries like Korea and Australia, because of our size and our capacity to influence and our economic performance, there are certain things that we can do that don't distinguish us from other alliances. In the common bond that I tried to stress in my speech between America, Japan and Australia, and we had that trilateral security dialogue that my government inaugurated, the common bond there is that we're Pacific democracies. And the same, of course, not perhaps specific, but the same applies, of course, common democratic bond with Korea. And there was talk at the time of the trilateral security dialogue of making it a quadrilateral one to include India. And in a sense, the bond there was our common democratic traditions. Now, I don't want to over-dramatise the use of one expression, but the word middle was meant to connote a capacity to influence, a stance, a status, our economic performance, the economic performance of Korea, the fact that in the East Timor dispute, which involved a very delicate interface between Australia and Indonesia, Australia was able to take a very strong regional leadership role, and I'm very happy to say that we received tremendous support from Korea in relation to that. So I see the concept as being defining performances by countries having a certain clout and a certain weight, not as a device to say, well, we're going to sort of develop a third way. The one way, as far as I'm concerned, is to build on the common democratic traditions of countries like Australia, the United States, Japan and Korea. I don't see a third way from that. I think that is the right way.
Prime Minister, Lee, would you like to respond briefly to the question?
Well, I don't have a direct response. I consider Japan not a middle power, but great power. It's after all the second largest economy in the world. Let me just remind you, about 3 months ago, at the end of April, we had a Trilateral Commission meeting in Tokyo, and Henry Kissinger said the following: Japan and Germany want to be the permanent member of the Security Council. Kissinger said it doesn't mean a thing. In the six-party talks, you have US, China, Russia, Japan, not to mention South Korea. And if these four great powers couldn't handle the North Korean issue, what could it will do to be a member of the Security Council? Security Council couldn't do anything. So what I'm really saying is the limits of influence and power of great powers or middle powers have to be reviewed or redefined. And I think we, as I said again, we are in a very important transition period, and we have to think about all these issues in a new light.
I know Foreign Minister Yu Myung-hwan is waiting to host the lunch, but let me, please allow me to take one last question from the floor, perhaps to Prime Minister Lee Hong-gu. Is there anyone in the audience? Yes, Ambassador Tanino from Japan. Yeah, please get to the microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Tanino. I retired from the Japanese Foreign Service some 8-9 years ago. My apology, first of all, is to my failure to bring former Prime Minister of Japan, Fukuda, who is a good friend of mine since we were children from school days. My apology. She is very much deep in the serious political campaign towards the end of this month, when the general election is to take place. So he simply couldn't leave Japan. Now, my question goes to Mr. Lee Hong-gu, and if I may, to you, Park Jin-san, as well. Yes, there's much talk about free trade agreement. We call it EPA in Japan. My question relates to Japan, South Korea, FTA or EPA. What we keep hearing from the South Korean officials, at least earlier, the stumbling block, difficulty lies in Japan, agriculture, and perhaps maritime products, but agriculture. Reluctance of Japan or part of Japan to open up Japanese agriculture market. But if I engage in private conversation, talks perhaps with South Korean business circles or even South Korean government officials, they say the real difficulty is really in the hands of South Korea. They are very much apprehended if, as a result of the agreement, South Korean economies open up to huge Japanese economy. It will inflict damaging effect. So difficulty really lies in South Korea. My question is, what is your view on this? I ask this to you, Mr. Park, because what is the general feel, atmosphere in the parliament? What Japan can do to alleviate the kind of apprehension, concern you may have in this regard? I ask this because Prime Minister Howard said again and again, when we aim at future East Asian Economic Community, Japan, South Korea, also China, are indeed a prime mover, prime driver towards that goal. So this is a very important issue. I keep asking myself. I wish to hear your view on this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Tanino. I'm supposed to be presiding the session, but not to answer the question. But let me, Prime Minister Lee, would you like to respond first?
I will yield to my friend Dr. Park, who is the current chairman of our Foreign Relations Committee at National Assembly, and he's much better versed on this issue than I am.
I second that.
All right. I hope it's not an intellectual bullying from both sides. But yes, Ambassador Tanino, I think we should really take more serious interest in pursuing this Korea-Japan FTA. Because FTA is supposed to be mutually beneficial. And in fact, it is in my view. But at the same time, Korea has concern about the level of opening on the agricultural products in Japan. And also we have, on our side, concern about the electronic machineries and parts made in Japan coming into the Korean market. So on both sides, we have concern and burden about this FTA. But I think that the spirit of mutual benefits and common prosperity should prevail any discussion of the FTA. Korea certainly is now having the burden of trade imbalance with Japan. We are running a lot of trade deficit with Japan, but we hope that the FTA could somehow ameliorate the problems that we have towards Japan, and Japan may get the similar benefits from entering into a more closer economic partnership with Korea. So I would advise to both government, our government in the Republic of Korea and also the Japanese government, that this is not insurmountable problems between two countries, given our common strategic interest and mutual benefits. And we can overcome any existing obstacles if we take very serious interest into the discussion of this trade agreement. Now, let me wind up this session of the World Leaders Conference. I hope the discussion was both productive and enjoyable. We had very insightful views and a very good presentation by the two former prime ministers. And also, I appreciate your attention, especially from the audience from foreign countries and foreign ambassadors serving in Korea. And I'd like to thank President Kim Se-won, the president of the International Peace Foundation, for hosting us, and also Acting Governor Lee Sang-bok of the Jeju Special Autonomy District. And I see two of my colleagues from the National Assembly. Mr. Kim Jae-yoon is from the Democratic Party, who is representing the district where this building is located. Mr. Kim Jae-yoon, thank you for providing us with nice support from the local government. Please give a big applause to Mr. Kim Jae-yoon. And I have my colleague in the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Kim Chung-hwan, who is a ranking member of the Grand National Party in the Foreign Affairs Committee. And thank you for your attendance, Mr. Kim Chung-hwan. Please stand up. So, politicians get encouraged when they get recognition and a lot of applause from the audience. So please understand. And I thank you very much for your patience, and I enjoyed it very much. Please enjoy your lunch. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, National Assemblyman Park Jin, for your excellent chairmanship and also for inspiring and insightful presentation. His Excellency John Howard and also Lee Hong-gu. Why don't we give a round of applause to three gentlemen as well? This concludes the first plenary session. Refreshments and coffee are prepared outside the hall, so please enjoy your coffee break until the lunch starts. At 12:30 p.m., the luncheon will be hosted by Minister Yu Myung-hwan of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The venue is Basement 1, the Diamond Hall, where you had dinner last night. And starting from 4:50 until 5:10, Prime Minister Han Sung-soo of Republic of Korea will give us keynote address. So please join us.